Good afternoon. My name is Suzanne Tyson. I'm the founder of higheredpoints.com, and I welcome everybody to the CCUF. You've hopefully learned a lot about schools and the different ways to find scholarships. We're going to talk specifically about all of the different ways to find funding for you to go to university or college. I'm going to start my screen share with everybody now so we can walk through a presentation. And we will share this presentation at the end of the session. We can send it out to you in its this format, in the PowerPoint format if you like, because there are lots of links in here. And the video of the session will be made available at the end of the fair as well. So don't worry if you're trying to take notes as we're going along. You'll get a copy of the presentation if you want it, and you'll also be able to watch the video. So Higher Ed Points, Ways to Pay for School Session, comes out of many, many years of me working in the student funding area and students asking about more than just scholarships, more than just government financial aid, etc. So what I did was I created a resource that is the one-stop shop guide for students in grades 10 to 12 and their parents to help them organize themselves in order to find money for school. So as you'll know, if you've been to 1 or 2 days or a couple of sessions here at the CCUF, you've got lots of decisions that you'll be making in the next little while. Are you going to go on to post-secondary, or are you going to take a gap year? Is the program that you want at college or university? Do you want to stay in Canada, or do you want to go someplace outside of the country? Living at home or living off campus if you move away from home, or in residence. Those are all decisions that are going to impact the cost of your education. But no matter what decisions that you make, every single student has to figure out how they're going to pay for their education. The first place you can start, I imagine that if you're at the fair, then you know about schoolfinder.com because they're putting this event on, or you know about Scholarships Canada, Schoolfinder's sister site. But the most amazing resource at the stage that you're at now, if you are just trying to figure out where to apply and what to study, is to go to schoolfinder.com and select the program that you want to study and start with accounting, for example, or finance, or arts, fine arts, etc., engineering. And then you can decide on the website whether you want to study at a university level, a college level, whether if you're going into grad school or if you're doing continuing education, you can put in the type of studying that you want to do. And you'll get a list of schools here at the School Finder site and programs. And you'll see there's a bachelor's option, a co-op option, honors option, etc. for Brock Accounting. And when you click on those links, it will bring you to a page that gives you information about the program with links over to the school's pages. Also within School Finder, you'll have information about the tuition costs, the entrance requirements for a lot of the programs, and then also the scholarships that are available at those schools. So once you've done all of that and you figured out, okay, I'd like to be in kinesiology at University of Alberta, and I want to take a university undergrad co-op degree. I don't know if that program exists, but imagine that's what you want to do. You'll be able to then figure out what it's going to cost you. And the interesting thing after many years in this field is that students say that tuition is the easy thing to budget for because it's defined on the website. It doesn't change that much from year to year. And it's the one cost that you can actually put on a piece of paper for the most part. But really, it's just the tip of the iceberg in terms of all of the costs that you're going to face to fund your post-secondary education. You've got, this slide actually comes from a research study that I did a number of years ago with what students were spending at the college level, in the university level, first year through fourth year. And this is the way things broke down. The next biggest cost after your tuition is going to be your rent or residence fees, then all of the food that you're going to eat, and then you also have to consider transportation, your cell phone, your computer, your internet, etc., clothing, etc. So the average debt that students in Canada report having, if they do have debt after graduation, is about $27,000. And only 4% of students will be able to make it all the way through their post-secondary without taking on some sort of debt. So if you're going to spend some time now on looking for scholarships, applying for scholarships, as soon as you're done your applications for the institutions, what we recommend that you do is download this PDF. There's a link here at the bottom to this worksheet that will actually help you estimate what the cost, the expenses of going away to school will be. So we've listed all of those categories on the previous slide on this worksheet. There's an Excel version, or you can print off a PDF. And then once you've got all of that information down, go and speak with if you've got RESPs, if your parents have saved for RESPs, ask them how much money is in the RESP and how it's going to be allocated. If you have siblings, perhaps there's a certain amount allocated for each sibling. Decide whether the money is going to be allocated over a number of years or if you're going to use it all in first year. And then these are the other sources of funds that you can start to fill in as you go along. And when I make these presentations in person, we have the students and the parents fill this form out as everybody's filing in to the session. And by the end, everybody has a gap of some sort. And the average number of sources of funding students in Canada are cobbling together for school is about 7. So don't be concerned if you do have a gap, and there are lots of ways to find funds along the way, which is what we're going to talk about now. So the great news is, out in the marketplace in Canada, there are lots of sources of funding. And you'll hear, if your guidance counselor has started talking to you about this, or if you've talked to recruitment people from campuses, they'll talk to you about merit-based awards. And these are the ones that are open right now. So you've probably seen lots of communication about the TD scholarships for community leadership. The Lauren Award is open. Schulich Leaders is another of the big ones. And then there are all sorts of other merit-based awards. And those are the ones that have criteria based on things that you've done in the past. So high marks, community service, excellence in sports, etc. And all of the institutions that you're applying to will also have merit-based awards. So when you're applying and you send in your marks to the universities or the colleges, they'll say, okay, for students that have averages of 90% plus, we're giving you an automatic entrance award of this amount. Then they'll have other awards that you can apply for based on that merit at the school itself. The next category of funding is financial needs-based awards. And about 10 to 20% of students are always going to be eligible in the top category for merit-based. Another 10 to 20% of students will be eligible for Canada student loans, the provincial funding. I've used OSAP as an example throughout the presentation because I'm based in Ontario. There are awards out there through clubs and programs like Boys and Girls Clubs. If you're in BC, the BD Luminaries Scholarship is one to check out. Pathways to Education has awards that they create for people from lower income families as well. And again, every school will have bursaries, grants, and sources of funding available to students that come from lower income. The definition of lower income is defined in the Canada Student Loan Program. You'll see what the requirements are, and you'll get a certain amount of funding based on your family income. One bit of advice, we're not going to spend too much time in this segment today, but one bit of advice is to ensure that your family tax information is up to date, because a lot of the awards will be asking for family income. They'll ask for your parents' latest tax returns, etc. And if you're a mature student, you're going back to school yourself, then have your own taxes ready, because it'll make it a lot faster when you go to apply for these things. Now, the other source of funding is the one that I love speaking about the most. This is where the 60% of students that really find with merit-based awards, they may not have super high marks, or they may not have community service outside the requirements to graduate. Their families may make too much money for them to qualify for enough financial aid, but here are the sources of funds that are available to everybody. And some of them require a little bit of digging. I call this category the middle 60 because it's 60% of students that are often finding they don't have enough money from those other two sources. So we'll talk about Higher Ed Points, the company that I founded. I'll spend some time on Scholarships Canada and the awards that are there. For those of you that didn't get to attend the How to Find Scholarships session that was held yesterday, please look for that video, because they'll do a deep dive into finding scholarships on the Scholarships Canada website. This image is Shelley Clayton. She's the Director of Financial Aid at the University of New Brunswick. And this is a student that Higher Ed Points helped fund some education. And she has the greatest advice. She said, you can't apply for an award that you don't know exists. So you do actually have to do a little bit of digging on these things. And the one common comment I find I get from parents who've had younger children go through the post-secondary thing is they say, I wish I had known, now that my child's in third year, what I now for my first year child, what I know now. Sorry. So anyway, you have to do a little bit of digging, and there are lots of awards out there that you can apply for. Don't forget, I won't spend much time on this category of funding, but a lot of people don't realize that the company they work for or the company their parents work for actually offer scholarships for dependent children. So ask, if you're employed, ask your employer, the Human Resources Department or People and Culture, what awards they have available, or ask your parents to go back to their Human Resources Department and find out if there are scholarships, because sometimes they're $5,000 awards, $500, $1,500, we've heard from different employers. The beer store used to have one for employees' children as well. There's going to be work. More than 50% of students are working while they're at post-secondary. And then sources of private funding, which we won't spend any time today talking about, but those include things like loans from family members or bank loans, lines of credit, etc. Those are other sources of funding. So higheredpoints.com it's been around now for 8 years, and we've helped we've offset close to $3 million worth of tuition through the conversion of loyalty points. So you can use anybody's. You don't have to have your own loyalty points. So tell your parents, tell your aunt and uncle, tell anybody in your life that runs a business that they can convert their TD Rewards points, their Aeroplan miles, their Aeroplan points, their American Express points, CIBC, and we also have Scotiabank, and by extension, SCENE points that can be converted into education credits through Higher Ed Points. And then Higher Ed Points deposits the funds on your behalf into your tuition account at your school, or if you take out loans, they can be deposited to repay your Canada student loans or your provincial loans as well. So visit higheredpoints.com and you can find out more about how it works. But we have lots of people who didn't realize that they could turn their points into tuition dollars. And not everybody's been traveling. A lot of people probably have a ton of points right now. You can go in and tap into some of those. So now to talk about scholarships. If you did attend the session, they will have said there are a lot of myths out there about scholarships. There's actually no scholarship season. The interesting thing is a lot of students that are in grade 12 now, it feels like, oh my gosh, I've got to get my application and my personal statements and my grades, work on my marks, and get all of this stuff in to apply. And all of the big scholarships seem to be open now because the TD Award is open right now. It closes in November. The Lauren Award is open, and a lot of other big ones that do marketing. They actually are big enough that they can create marketing out there. But keep in mind, there are scholarships that are open all through the year. In fact, the Opturus Rebel with a Cause Award is open April into June. So go into your Scholarships Canada account, and every month or so, calendarize about an hour to troll around in there, because you'll find that other scholarships, new ones have come out, and other ones are opening up in the spring season. So we'll talk a little bit about the TD Scholarship for Community Leadership, because I like to use that as an example of one of the big merit-based awards. Your campus financial aid officers, as I've got this picture of Shelley Clayton up again, but when you enroll in your school and you accept your offer of admission to the school, make sure that you go and register at the financial aid website, or if you can go on campus in person, because a lot of them now have something called a one application or something similar, where one time a year in the fall, you fill out a form that talks about what you're studying, what your marks are, might ask you some questions about sports that you play, languages that you speak, culture, background, etc. And then on that campus, when awards become available or things that you're eligible for come up, you're automatically considered. So you don't actually have to apply for those things. So check in with your campus financial aid office for sure. And this is something that your parents can help you with now, because every single campus has a financial aid and awards section on their website with tons of information. Some of the really great ones out there that I was looking at recently, Carleton has an amazing website. University of New Brunswick has a Money Matters page. McMaster University has a really great section on sources of funding out there. And I love talking about the ridiculously huge award, the Khan Academy Breakthrough Junior Challenge. A Canadian won this one last year, Mariam Segay. She won $400,000 US prize. Her school won some money. She had like a full ride wherever she wanted to go to study. And she got a new computer and all sorts of equipment. And the link is here. You can check out the link. But the thing I like about this scholarship is that there's judging done by your peers. So everybody that actually enters the contest needs to judge and adjudicate other applicants' awards. So it seems a lot more fair in some ways than having people, having people that are in their careers, maybe they haven't been in school for a while, they don't know what it's like these days to have all of the competing demands on your time. So that's a great award. The Opterus one, I'll speak about this one later because we always get questions about international students and what funding is available for them out there. This is one of the ones that's available for international students. And the thing I love about this is there's an award for the arts and an award for STEM. There's lots of money for the science, technology, and engineering, math, but this one has a $10,000 award for arts, and you actually can apply from the time you're 16 up to the time that you're 28, and you don't actually have to be enrolled in school at the time that you're going, nor do you actually have to use the funds necessarily to pay for your tuition. It's called the Rebel with a Cause because Janet Hawkins, who founded it at Opterus, is a rebel herself. So check that one out this spring. The TD Scholarship, I always say to students, pick one of the big awards, look at the criteria that they have in that award, and apply for one of them. Just pick one of the big ones and apply for them because they have things in their application process that you can use time and time and time again. And I like the TD one because, first of all, the mark requirement is 75%. They're not interested in students that have super high marks. They ask an essay that requires people to think deeply about their community leadership experience and why they got involved in that, how it shows that your involvement shows initiative and you're an innovative individual, ways that your efforts have strengthened others. And it also asks you questions about how long you've been involved. A lot of these scholarship programs don't want students that decide in grade 11, oh, I've got to start applying for scholarships next year. I'm going to start doing volunteering now. They're really looking for longevity of commitment to a program or a volunteer effort, something that you've done out there. The other thing that Jane Thompson, who's the executive director of this award, has said is they're looking for students who are innovators. It's not the student that is necessarily on student council every year, but it's the student that said there's a need in my community and I'm going to create this, or I have created this thing to meet that need. This is an awesome award as well because it's huge, $70,000 for 20 students, but you also get internships and you don't have to work at TD Bank for that internship. You can work at a charity or someplace else and TD will pay your salary. So it's a win-win for you and for the charity. Always, always, always get the letters of recommendation from people who know you well, somebody who's worked with you, and have them address that letter specifically to the scholarship you're applying for. I've adjudicated hundreds and hundreds of applications, and when I see someone that's saying, Dear TD Scholarship Leadership Adjudication Committee, I am strongly recommending this candidate. I've worked with them here, they did this, I know they've done that. It shows how well the person knows you, which also shows your commitment to that initiative. If they give you options to write extra essays, always take the time to do that. It actually, most students will, but take your time in crafting something. You don't have to write up to 250 words. You can write 100 words if you can say what you need to say in 100 words, but do try and do the extra, go above and beyond for some of these awards. And as I say, once you apply for one of these, you can probably apply for almost every other award out there once you've done it once. So my advice on scholarships is to register at scholarshipscanada.com. There are other sites out there as well. Take a look at all of them and sign up for all of them. The thing I like about Scholarships Canada is it has the campus awards, the in-course awards, in addition to all of those independent awards like the Schulich, and the TD award and the smaller awards. They know about Scholarships Canada because they've been around for so long, so you're going to find more awards listed at the site. Then when you go through, if you're a grade 12 student right now, you'll probably have 130 or more scholarships that fit your profile. Create a master list of the awards that you think you want to apply for, and write down the deadlines and sign up for any alerts that are available for those scholarships. And then based on your list, if you've got 130 awards and you bring it down to about 20, put them in order of interest for you, because if there's a video contest, or I like the Stuck at Prom duct tape award, where you can make your prom dress out of duct tape, find ones that you find personally interesting, because it's going to be easier for you to apply for them, and you'll be able to do it quickly and then get on to the rest of them. One piece of advice, read the terms and conditions, because you will find out they might have a rubric that says we're looking for someone, 50% of this award is going to be based on community service, or 20% on marks, etc. So read those terms and conditions, because you'll find lots of information about what the adjudication committee is looking for in your application. And if they have a space that you can see what previous winners did and what their backgrounds are, you can also get a flavor for what they're looking for. As I mentioned, everything is updated regularly, so go back and revisit the sites that you register at regularly. And I've written an article at the Higher Ed Points website and in my personal LinkedIn feed on tips for winning scholarships and awards. And Janet McDonald presented earlier. Hopefully you're able to sit in Janet's how to write a winning essay. So the next, just going to do a quick time check. The next area of funding that we get asked about a lot is government student grants and loans. And so Canadian citizens can apply for Canada student loans, and the website to visit is canada.ca, and this link in particular will take you directly into the area where you can find all sorts of educational funding. Your other resource, again, your campus financial aid and awards officers at each school. They're the liaison between you when you apply for your loan and the government. You will be applying to the government, but your financial aid office is the one to go to if you have questions, and you can do that before you get to campus. They're more than happy to take questions. You can do it when you're on campus, and then if you find that your first couple of years you don't need student loans, go to them in third year if you need them. I know lots of students that are fine for the first couple of years, and then they do need to get grants and loans. There are lots of resources available for COVID-19 for students. There's a link there that you can visit. And there's also a special link at the federal government website for student work placements. And they have partnerships with companies like Ripen that offer paid internships. There was a program called Level Up through Ripen that had micro projects students could work on, and they had flat funding. I believe it was $1,000 or maybe more per project that students could work on and gain work experience. So just bookmark these sites and you can revisit them whenever you need to. So here's the basics. Your grants that you're going to get don't have to be repaid. And so I used to work closely with the person that runs OSAP, and he said, every student, even if you think you don't need or don't want the loan portion, apply, because you might get free grant money that doesn't have to be repaid. The other portion of the financial aid you'll get will be the loan portion, which does have to be repaid, and interest starts accruing 6 months after you graduate. The funds that you're going to get are funded in part by the federal government and part by the provincial governments. And in Ontario and these provinces, you're going to have one application that gets you the funds from the federal government and the provincial government. In these provinces, you have to apply, in Alberta and Manitoba, Nova Scotia, PEI, you have to apply to the federal student loan program and your provincial student loan program. So there's two applications, and you have to repay those two separately. And then in these provinces and territories, they operate their own student loan program, and the Yukon offers the federal program only. So you don't need to worry about all of this. So here's a link to the federal financial assistance calculator. You can actually figure out by putting in this data what you might get in financial assistance. But if you start at the canada.ca website, each province has its own link to their loan program. I've just taken screen caps of OSAP because it's the one I'm most familiar with, and everything you need to know about OSAP is on this page. You can learn about the program, how to apply for it, what happens after you apply, how to get the money, after you graduate, how do you repay the loan, etc. And after you apply for OSAP, the thing that a lot of students don't know is that they can appeal. If you feel there's a special circumstance, if you've got, multiple siblings and your parents are not going to fund your education or have to spread it out over multiple siblings, your financial aid officer at your campus can help you request a funding review of the money that you've been offered. The other reason, aside from the grants, that you want to apply for student loans, if you're right on the cusp financially, is that in Ontario, there's a student access guarantee. And if you're in a super expensive program, if you're in engineering or in commerce, they'll look at how much funding that you got. And then after you've started school, you might actually get additional funding because it wasn't enough based on your program. Tuition for an arts program, maybe $6,000. Your tuition for your commerce, maybe $18,000. So you'll get more money. The other reason to apply is that often there are campus work-study programs that go first to students that are on OSAP. And the other piece of information that the person from OSAP mentioned to me was you don't have to take the loan portion. If you don't want to take the loan, you can just take the grant and not take the loan portion. So there's lots to dig in there. Now, when it comes to work, the one-stop shop that I always suggest to students is, regardless of where you are right now, if you're grade 10, 11, or 12, or even if you're just going into first year, set yourself up with a LinkedIn profile. It's free, anybody can do it, and you can put information up there about what you're doing at this time and what you hope to do in the future. But create a profile that has whatever volunteer experience, if you're in high school, if you're in first year, and what you think you want to do. Because when you put in aspiring, engineer, then you'll find you'll get information in your feed about engineering careers and other people in engineering. You can connect with people that you meet along the journey. So if you go to information sessions on a university or a college, link in with the person who comes to your school, link in with your employers. If you're working now with summer job, link in with that employer. You can connect with your parents' friends, etc. And you can also research industries and companies and jobs that can actually help you figure out what you want to study if you're not quite sure as well. I actually love trolling through for these presentations and seeing if I can find things that would be of interest to people attending. But Peter Tran is at Amazon and he's hiring multiple engineering roles. And he's working in Toronto. And he's someone that you could probably send a note out to and say, I'd love to link in with you because I'm potentially interested in working with Amazon in the future. I did a search for campus program management and recruitment. Camilla Noble is the campus recruiter for Restaurant Brands International, RBI. I believe that's all of the, I forget which restaurants they run. And McKinsey is also a campus recruitment person. They love connecting with students, and keeners in high school will always be, you'll be first in line when they're posting things about jobs that are available or information fairs on their jobs. LinkedIn has an amazing feature called Who's Hiring in Canada, and they did something a few months ago where they divided it by industry sector. So I was only able to capture automotive and retail, but they not only list the companies that are hiring, they list how many positions they're hiring for, and there's a link directly over to those companies. And then the last recommendation, our friends over at eLoft Careers have tons of amazing job seeking advice. And the advice that I have for finding a job, if you're not yet in grade 12, if you find a job in your home city and you're planning to move to a different city, you can actually look for a job with an employer that hires students in that city as well. My daughter, for example, worked at Starbucks in Toronto, and when she moved to Queens in Kingston, she worked at Starbucks for 2 years of her time there. And she was going to go on, well, she did go on exchange and then was sent home because of COVID, but she could have worked, if she had a work permit, anywhere in the world where there were English-speaking Starbucks. The other ones are hotels. They have, of course, locations everywhere. Canadian Tire, anything that's a franchise location. If you've worked at one and you get a reference from your manager, it's very likely that you can find a job in that home city. So I like spending time. I'll just spend a few more minutes going through this, and then we'll have a question and answer session with you. So start putting some of your questions in the chat. But the challenge for international students, every session I give always has international students. A lot of the awards aren't available for international students. You have to be a Canadian citizen or a permanent resident, but I want to assure you there's lots of money out there for international students. Higher ed points can be used by international students, no problem. And there are scholarships out there. The Optus Award I mentioned to you, your campus financial aid officers, even though you can't get government student loans, they have lots of sources of funding for international students. And this past year has really helped them explain to institutions, explain to scholarship providers that international students need extra help because the Canadian students were able to get the CESB or the CERB, and the international students found that they couldn't, they didn't have family members necessarily to rely on. So the financial aid officers actually had special funds set aside for emergency funds for international students. So again, even more important for international students to get into the campus financial aid office. We created something new at Higher Ed Points called the ALT Scholarship, which is everything that the regular scholarships is not. It's a crowdfunding program that you can find at the link on the top. And we created it because we wanted to make sure that there was an award that every student could apply for. So anybody can register for an ALT scholarship account. You can crowdsource funds from your family, friends, from strangers at the site. And you can also crowdsource loyalty points that you can convert into those funds. So you can find out more there. And Rai Putriansyah is a student, she's from Indonesia. She is in BC, and she was the first student to raise $2,000 with her ALT scholarship. And what she did was she just shared it on social media. And so there were lots of people that didn't know that she needed help funding school. And she had donations from all over, from her home country, from here in Canada, et cetera. And so we reached out to Rai and found out that she was an international student, and she wrote us an article with 5 tips for prospective international students, which you can find on the blog at Higher Ed Points as well. So there's also an international section for international students, and there are scholarships available through the Government of Canada for international students. And these are additional resources that are good for domestic students and for international students. Janet presented earlier. Visit her My Campus GPA website for how to be the most efficient you can be when you're applying for scholarships and how to put your best foot forward in those applications. You might want to take a gap year. A gap year is a great year, a great time to figure out what you want to do, to work, to earn some money, maybe do a bit of traveling. And then what I understand from the Gap Year Association out there and all of the companies that do it is apply to school now, get your acceptance letter, and see if you can defer. A lot of schools will let you defer that acceptance, but then you've got a plan to go after your degree a year later, and then you can figure out what to do. If you don't know what to do in that year, visit cangap.ca. They've got all sorts of resources and programs, and one of Higher Ed Points partners is Discover Year, which is an organized program that has steps through the entire year to help people figure out what path they want to take. For international students, if you're sending money from your home country, Flywire is a company that allows you to transfer funds from your home country into your school account at the best foreign exchange rate that you can get, and lower fees than anything. English language test, there's a Canadian company called Paragon Testing that has the CALE academic test for study in Canada, and both Flywire and Paragon Testing have scholarships for international students. And the other recommendation we have for international students is to check out devant.ca. This is more at the end of your studies because they help students with the immigration path to Canada, resume preparation, making sure that you have, you can translate any skills that you have from working in your home country into job appropriate cover letters and interviewing skills as well. That's everything for the main portion of the presentation. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. Here's, if you'd like a copy of the presentation, feel free to email me, Suzanne Tyson. You can send it to info@higheredpoints.com. And we can also get the School Finder folks to share the presentation. So I will stop sharing and we can have a question and answer session. Okay, so Tess, if you're there, you might.
Yeah, so it looks like we got quite a few questions throughout the presentation. Starting at the very top, is student loan a good way to pay for school?
So I would say back to my original comment that students cobble together funds from everywhere. If you and absolutely apply for a student loan, take the grant for sure. You don't have to take the student loan. I met a student and actually hired her as an intern for Higher Ed Points. And she said her approach to the student loans was she would take the funding that she got in the loan, she would put it in a separate bank account away from her day-to-day banking, so she wouldn't touch it. If she got into an emergency situation, she knew it was there, but if she did use money from the loan pool, she would actually work and replenish that fund as quickly as she could. But in terms of access to fund and not having to make repayments on those loans while you're at school, it is a great source of funding. So go do your research, find out how much money is available to you, find out how much grant you get versus loan, and decide what you want to do with the loan, whether you need it right away. But that's a preferable route to taking a line of credit at a bank, because you will have to make payments and it will accrue interest on any dollars that you put onto your line of credit or your loan.
Great. Another question related to student loans. Does the student loan interest begin right when your classes begin?
No, it does not. It starts, you're in an interest-free zone until 6 months after you graduate from the federal portion, and check your provincial loan portion. Ontario used to have a 6-month grace period on interest accruing. You don't have to make repayments on either the provincial or the federal portion of your loans for 6 months, and interest will not start accruing on the federal portion, but it will in some provinces on the provincial loan.
Great. All right. When searching for your own scholarships, so research, what are signs that the offer is not actually legit?
Signs that the scholarship program is not legitimate, I'll assume that's the question. If you're asked to pay any money to apply for something, I would take a second look, right? And you can probably, there's lots of ways to do searching on the scholarship program. Anything listed at Scholarships Canada will have been vetted by a human being before it gets posted in the database. And they have a very open channel of communication with students that have had bad experiences with the scholarships. But if you wanted to put an example that maybe you've come across in the chat, we can chat about something out there. But if they ask you to pay any money for it, if they're asking you for things that seem really odd, more personal information than would be required for a scholarship, those sorts of things. But stick to the legit sites, and your campus financial aid office site as well will have things that have been vetted by a person, an individual, before it gets up there.
Perfect. Earlier we were talking about participating in communities and volunteering in the community. Does that count? Does school count or no?
Volunteering at school?
Yes.
Yes, volunteering at school would count for sure. I would use the volunteer requirements to graduate as a basis. If it qualifies for that, then absolutely. And one thing about volunteering, it's interesting. I met a student once who applied for a scholarship and got to the finalist round, and then he was eliminated, unfortunately, because he didn't list volunteer experience. And he thought it had to be something super fancy, but he had been helping his younger siblings with their hockey. He was coaching for hockey for ages, and that would count. So anything that is unpaid, voluntary would count, including, so I'm thinking about at your school, if they've got a community night or any sort of event where you're going and dedicating time to it, that would be considered volunteer hours as well. I hope that answered your question.
That seems great. All right. Another question about OSAP. Do you have to pay back money you get from OSAP?
Yes. The loan portion you do have to pay back. The grant portion you do not. And so when you apply, They'll tell you what they estimate. You can actually go and there's an OSAP calculator, and every province will have a calculator in addition to the federal one I showed. And you will be told when you do the calculator before you apply, this is how much you can anticipate receiving in grant and in loan. The loan portion is what has to be paid back.
All right. Are there differences between loans from different banks?
Yes. So I'm not an expert on what's available right now at the banks, but every one of the big 5 banks will have a student section at the site, and they'll also have special offers that they're giving to students, domestic and international students. And the different products that they have available will be loans, lines of credit, student credit cards, student banking, etc. And you can just do, in fact, there's probably a website, I forget the name of it, NerdWallet, I think, does a lot of comparison out there of the different programs that are available. But check out each one. And then if your family members or your parents' guardians have been a bank customer for a long time, go directly into the bank and have a conversation, because you can negotiate sometimes on the things that are available based on the tenure that you've had with that bank.
Awesome. Another question about scholarships. How early should I be searching for scholarships?
So the Opterus Award that I mentioned in the presentation, if you're 16 and you're a female, I would apply. You might as well start applying to the ones that are available. The big bulk of awards really start in grade 12. So that's the grade 12 going into first year is when you're going to find you've got the biggest opportunity for all sorts of different awards. And that's simply because the scholarship providers know that's the biggest time when students are all doing the same thing at the same time. But as I mentioned when I was presenting, there's no scholarship season, and there are awards throughout your entire career. It's very unusual for awards to be made available before you get into school, but the practice makes perfect. So if you can actually start, if you're in grade 10 or 11, you take a look at the TD Award or the Schulich or the Lauren Award, see what the criteria is, start to craft your own personal story for those scholarships. And I would say if you're in grade 11, it's a really great time to look at them now for grade 12, because you're going to be super busy in grade 12. So take a load off for grade 12 and start applying and looking and getting everything together. And also the one thing that I hear from schools all the time is a lot of students are asking for reference letters. You saw in the TD Award that you needed to have reference letters. Try and get those things lined up, or make people aware that you're going to be asking them for that help in advance. And a lot of times, like the teachers or the community leaders that you're working with might be doing so many different things that if you remind them of the things that you did, it'll make it easier for them to draft the letter. And in some cases, you can even create a draft for them, which they edit and send in on your behalf. So make the reference person's life easy for you when you're asking for their help.
Awesome. So we have time for a couple more questions. Here's one about student loans. Can you start paying off student loans before you finish school?
Absolutely. Very, very good idea. And with higher ed points, we have a lot of family members that have done that for their kids. So you're probably not going to have your own loyalty points, but a lot of parents will have loyalty points. And if you can start paying off those loans before the interest period kicks in, you're going to save a ton of money. We did a calculation. Every $250 that you can pay off before interest starts accruing, the average student takes 8 to 10 years to repay all of those loans. You'll save $130 in interest on each $250 increment at the interest rate at the time we did that calculation. So absolutely.
Great. All right. We have just one more question. You mentioned we should apply for a student loan and we might get a grant. If I have applied in first year when being in college, do I have to apply again after I transfer to a university to still be eligible for the grant?
Whoa, that's a very good question. And I think that you should talk to, if you're transferring and you've got your plan set for transferring, reach out to the financial aid department at the university And I think the amount of funding is available based on what you're studying, and you can use that request for a review of funding that I showed in one of the slides. But you can talk now, if you're at the college, talk to the college financial aid officer, because you can probably speak to a real person, and then speak as well to your university person. I don't think you have to reapply. They do ask you at the beginning of each year to confirm that you're still an enrolled student, and that's one of the criteria they use for continuation of your loan. And you might get more money if you're in a more expensive program.
Great. All right. That looks like no questions. So a recording of this session will be available immediately after the slide presentation is done. So if you miss any information, you can check it out there. Suzanne, I believe you also mentioned that you will be circulating a PowerPoint if they email you.
Yep. And I can send it to you as well, and that can be made available as well.
Perfect. I've also included your email in the chat. So if anyone wants to email info@higheredpoints.com, you can do so there. If they have any other questions, feel free to contact Suzanne or CCUF. But thank you, Suzanne, for that great presentation.
Thanks for your time, and enjoy, everybody. Good luck.
Have a great day, everyone.